I think this is an amazing film and really interesting. I think it's politically bullshit.
Oh, yes, of course, because there's a bunch of closed-minded racist morons that represent people in the seats of power.
So this is part of that conversation of like the imagined American working class that we've been doing for decades now.
These are Bollywood musicals. They just don't have dance numbers because Hollywood doesn't have the balls to just, put in a dance number. And if you can direct an action sequence, you can direct a dance sequence.
It's 5 fucking stars. It's absolutely unbelievably beautiful and amazing. And it is total propaganda for the Cuban Revolution. I don't think anymore that you can avoid fighting inside and outside of the state at the same time. I think there may be multiple ways to do that. I don't think electoral politics is the only way to do that.
Yeah, but some shit's got to get burned down too, so...
Right.
Honestly, it kind of warms my heart that somebody out there was thinking that the Watermelon Woman was a threat to, white, hetero, cis, Christian culture.
I know we're saying that this isn't technically like a good movie, but a movie with surprisingly good elements and a really fucked up package.
This ending, you have good characters that are entirely powerless against the unstoppable evil capitalists.
Mm-hmm. Only after Avengers did Marvel movies start doing as well as Ghost.
Right.
Starring Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and some very phallic clay.
Did the word pornography ever enter your mind when you were watching this film, Isaac?
Nope.
And I think it has the politics of cinema stamp of approval. If you want to use this as a first date movie, go for it.
It seemed to have worked out for my folks. Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff.
Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, and in every time period. We here are on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller, and welcome to our Christmas episode. We will be covering the classic Christmas film Harakiri from 1962 by Masaki Kobayashi.
Indeed, it's full of snow and Yuletide joy and even a little werewolf cameo about halfway through.
Really? Wait, I didn't even notice that.
I'm really trying to keep this werewolf thing going, but I got nothing on this one.
Okay, well, that's all right. I mean, as long as the spirit, we just gotta keep working with it.
Well, I'll put it this way: there's a point where Tetsuya, who's playing Sugumo, the star of this one, kind of has a werewolf vibe because his beard is ferocious.
He has a great beard.
A great beard in this one.
I gotta say, his ability to be a grizzled old man when he is very much not one at that point is really impressive.
Oh, that's a good point. How old is he in this movie, or when he started this one? Do you know?
No. I mean, he's leading man age.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Born in 1932. Oh, he's like 30.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, part of it is, he's one of the absolute greats, right?
Oh my God. I'm not sure if I've seen him outside of this. I don't have his filmography in front of me.
I don't know. Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, Sanjuro, Kagamusha.
These aren't ringing any bells for me.
You're messing with me.
Yeah, I'm messing with you.
But those are just the Kurosawas, and
right.
The Face of Another, Sword of Doom, The Human Condition. I mean, he's an absolute legend.
Well, Human Condition I have not seen, so that is now top of my list after watching this film. And yeah, it's such a commanding lead performance that I'm I don't even know how to do my watch list now. Do I watch all of the Kobayashi films, or do I watch all of the ones that Tetsuya stars in? Which luckily there's a huge bunch of overlap there, so I can just do them both at the same time.
I mean, I have a confession. I've seen a decent amount of Kobayashi. I've definitely got more to see, but I've actually never watched The Human Condition because it's a lot of film.
I feel like it's going to be a compulsion, though, once you click play on the first one there, where you're like, and?
Yep, exactly.
I mean, it's binge-worthy cinema before that word was even a thing.
The Human Condition one, No Greater Love, is 206 minutes.
It kind of bugs me a little bit when people are like, oh, that movie's too long, especially in the age we live in where people are binge watching new seasons of, insert name of garbage TV show here. And like, oh yeah, I spent all Saturday on the couch. I'm like, you could do. Well, I mean, honestly, emotionally, I probably couldn't do that. But
That's the thing is, I don't think you can actually watch human
Yeah.
condition that way because you're gonna break down.
right. The closest I've come to that was I remember I watched Satan Tango all in one go at the in a theatrical setting a few years back, just pre-COVID actually, and I was like, okay, I need to go talk to a counselor and really kind of process the last because it just becomes your life for that day. It's very immersive and interesting, but oh my gosh.
I actually, so I don't, I just want to clarify. I know it actually did sound that way. I do not think the human condition is too long. I trust Kobayashi to an incredible degree, and I'm sure it's just as long as it needs to be to tell the story he wants to tell. But as with my current condition of film watching capacity, it's been on the list for a long time. I'm just like, I don't know when this is going to happen.
Well, then also just to clarify, more of a clarification here, I wasn't picking on you for that. I didn't mean to imply that. If I did, I just meant in general. You hear that just around when you're just talking to people, friends, casual work acquaintances that are like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go see that. I was just talking with somebody about Babylon, the new Damien Chazelle film, and they're like, oh, it's over 3 hours. I'm like, you just saw Avatar. What the fuck? Like, it's
Right.
you
Right.
just binged something 2 weekends ago. Like, it's fine. Why are you worried about a running time? Also, it's the same people that complain about, when we were at the art house working together, Isaac, people that complain about a ticket price raising. I'm like, well, hey, you're getting your money's worth. It's 3 hours long.
Right. I think there's been a general tendency. All right, I will join this course mildly. In terms of mainstream film,
Yeah.
I think there's been a tendency to forget how to edit.
Are we looking specifically at like Judd Apatow now in this area, or?
No, I just mean in the sense that like, why that doesn't. There's no reason this is 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Right.
Just over and over again. But no, that's not necessarily Babylon. God, I need to catch up. I'm like catching up on 2021 movies.
I'm actively avoiding 2022 movies, so we're in a similar boat here. I like kind of being unplugged from current theatrical nonsense, and I'm able to dive into deeper film history, like Harakiri, or I could just click play on The Human Condition or something, because I don't feel obligated to run out and see Avatar: Way of the Water right now.
So here's this is a condition that happened to us post COVID, and the life of this podcast has almost been all during the COVID period. So we didn't used to be like this. We used to keep up on what was cool.
Well, part of it was that's where we were working too, so that helped.
It helped a lot when we actually worked at a indie theater.
And we were seeing them for free because we worked there. So,
well, but so for me, what it is that I want to be part. Psychologically, one, I do want to see new stuff, and I want to see what people are talking about. But it's also, I want to see it as a living art form.
Sure.
And especially in a period in which, frankly, we're sort of there's fear about the future of the medium and what it means. I want to, keep it tied. I feel like the older stuff I'm watching doesn't feel alive if I treat it. This is me, not you. It would start to feel like a museum curio if I'm just watching older stuff.
Okay.
I need to tie it to what's in the present. As a way of sort of appreciating the art form as a whole, right? So like the thing is, I've been a geek for many things in my life, but being a film geek, you're a geek for a medium, and so for me, it's there's a certain comprehensiveness to it. I don't watch every type of movie, and I'm definitely into certain other things, some things more than others. If you looked at my letterbox, it's pretty scruffy right now, but does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Like where does Kobayashi, where does a movie like Harakiri lead us, right? Into the present, and I want to catch, and it feels good to watch a new good movie. I just wish that the film industry and everything in the world was better.
I'm with you there. I think because I'm not in an environment that is my job anymore, like working at the art house and just being around people that want to talk about what they just watched, and as best I could have already watched that myself. Maybe it's more of a reaction to like not being in that particular environment anymore, that I don't steer as much into modern films.
Yeah.
Could be. I mean, I have like a long, like my film journal, like the back few pages every time I start a new one, like I'll just write in like all the stuff I want to see. And I just spent so many years keeping up with what was contemporary that I just really didn't have time to and wasn't watching the stuff,
Mm,
the depths of film history. But then also not working at the art house anymore. I have time and have been teaching film history classes. So I've been really trying to dive in, like, well, if I'm going to talk about these films, I need to see all 35 of these, biker movies from the 60s if we're going to cover the American new cinema. So I think my day-to-day conversations, especially depending on what the focus of the class was, that sort of replaced the lobby conversation for me. So it does feel very
mm.
alive to me in that sense, because I feel
Yeah.
connected with other people are also watching stuff and we're all talking about, and it is like a communal experience, just kind of in a different, actually a little more fractured way, because we're watching them ahead of time and then discussing them in a class setting. So that's, yeah, I guess I've just sort of swapped them out, I guess, a little bit. But I do have time off after the holiday here that I do have my lineup of, I think it's like 6 or 7 2022 movies I need to just sit down and get to. So we'll be
I
doing, but now we're wasting a whole bunch of time talking about modern stuff that we're not watching versus this amazing film
that we
that we need
did.
to dive into because there's so much stuff here.
Let's talk about, frankly, one of the greatest Japanese, or I think one of the greatest movies ever made, and one of the formative movies for me as a film person, as a teenager. Because I got introduced to Kurosawa by my dad. He was sort of sort of result of '60s film culture, and I remember, and I loved all that, and there's a lot of stuff you see that way, and I remember seeing this, and it just was one of the ones that just blew me away.
Way on the big screen too, you said, right?
I'm trying to remember. I think I did see it on the big screen. I think I might have seen it on the small screen first, and then I got all my friends to go see it at the Cinematheque.
Nice, nice. This is
Yeah,
definitely a see it on as big a screen as you can kind of movie.
God, it's just beautiful. Well, let's jump in.
The thing I kind of wanted to, like, my first general thought I wanted to mention about watching Harakiri, for this is like first time watch for me. It's one of those like I need to get to that one. I'll get to that someday. In my head, and I don't think I don't think I'm alone with this sentiment. In my head, there's certain films, and this is a perfect example of that, where like, oh, it's like you mentioned, I don't think we were recording yet, but you go on Letterbox and it's just all 5 stars. Like it's
Yeah.
an inarguable masterpiece of world cinema, specifically though, coming out of a Japanese cinema tradition. There's a tendency sometimes when there's that kind of a weight behind it, like an expectation of this is a classic, you are like it is going to blow you away, that
Mhm.
will feel like film school homework to me.
Mm,
And I cannot get this thought out of my head, and there isn't necessarily always like a pleasure involved, that like, oh, sit down and like I'm going to enjoy this. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like it
Yeah,
feels
I
more like
totally
an
know.
assignment than it's going to be like an enjoyable watch. And I just wanted to say right off the bat, like this movie is insanely compelling and riveting and an absolute joy to watch. It just also is so skillfully made in every single department, and we'll talk about a lot of those as we go through this, that it is a flat out masterpiece, and you can't argue otherwise. But it's not like this cold, oh, like you were just saying, this isn't like a cold museum piece
Wrong.
at all. Like you could just pick anything. You could pick just the structure of the screenplay. You could pick the way the music is used. You could pick the way the cinematography is utilized. You can pick the way it's choreographed. And it's, you can have like an invigorating, and I hope we do, conversation about how amazing and top level all of the aspects are of this. But not in a cold, just like, oh, look at, oh, yes, look at that. That's interesting. No, in a exciting, holy shit, this is amazing and so engaging kind of way.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, this is, I mean, I would start saying this, we've said it before on the podcast, as whenever we do sort of 50s, 60s, 40s Japanese film, it's sort of like this. I say this is, pound for pound, the best in the world at
Hmm.
this time, just for the level of comprehensiveness.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, you were going to start talking about who's behind the camera a little bit here before we jump into the story. And, this is also, well, this is an incredible crew behind the camera. Like this is, there's a reason it's what it is. Like this combination of people is about as good as it gets. And the other thing is, this is a perfect movie for this podcast. So I was saying how formative it is for me. It's also a formative political film for me. Like of watching political film, and it is extremely political movie to the point of controversy.
Well, how did it hit you when you were younger and first saw it then?
I I don't remember exactly what my impressions were, but I think I picked up on that. Like I picked up on it as a film attacking hierarchies.
Okay.
Savagely attacking hierarchies. I mean, I think basically without quarter.
Well, and not just doing it as like a talking point or a line of dialogue, like there's a meaning to it when it's said.
Yeah.
In this one as well.
It brings. I mean, yeah, we should talk about who's behind the camera and then and jump into how it affects.
Well, I mean more because like it earns it in the way that it structures the story too. It doesn't just like come right out in the opening scene. Like it builds properly so that you really feel the punch of the narrative that also
Mhm.
has like a political meaning right there along with that punch.
It is incredibly structured.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, and the political and the sort of emotional weight of the film meld perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted, before we get into sort of like the collaborators and who's working on it, since we just did a couple of episodes on Yakuza Noir, Tokyo Drifter from '66 and Cold as My Passport from '67, you were echoing the same sentiment on both of those episodes about how like this is like film for film, like some of the best stuff in the world at that time going on. Then let's also flashback 1954. You've got something like Seven Samurai. So you've got this run here within Japanese cinema, and we're only looking like, let's just say Seven Samurai, 50s example there, up through right here with 1962, and then up through 67 with the Yakuza Noir we are just looking at. Wildly different genres there too, and we're not even getting into some of like the more stoic kind of like period piece dramas that were also going on, or musicals that were being produced by the same studio. Like it's just like this weird embarrassment of riches for decades.
Yeah, for decades. And I mean, so and part of it is like, look, I mean, the star of this film. So I think it's the people, the star of this film. I mean, I already said this. Tetsuya Nakeda. Yeah, we just looked through his filmography, and it's just nothing but like there's just masterpiece after masterpiece
Yeah.
after masterpiece. And he's that good, but it's also that he has the opportunity to be in one masterpiece after another. And it's not just because he's working with Kurosawa, because Kurosawa is the one that everybody's going to know. It's that multiples. There are multiple directors who are actually, I mean, including specifically like somebody like Kobayashi, who are working basically at that level.
Yeah.
I mean, this film for me, and this is not a matter of who's a better director, but this specific film is as good as anything for me that Kurosawa put out. And it's very different.
Yes.
It shares a humanism, but a different one, and it's more vicious.
Indeed.
So who made this movie?
Well, let's jump. Let's say behind the camera. Every movie starts with an idea and a writer here. So we have Shinobu Hashimoto is the screenwriter here for this film. Few other obscure movies he is the author of, like Rashomon, Ikiru, Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, Hidden Fortress, Samurai Rebellion, Sword of Doom. From what I was able to read up on him, he not like literally threw away this particular screenplay, but was just like, oh yeah, I'm like, it's like a little too bleak or whatever. I guess there was maybe some ideas of maybe we'll make this as like a TV film at some studio. But when Kobayashi got a hold of it and read it, he was just like, oh my God, I'm doing this movie. And I think it's kind of interesting that he responded that way, because then looking into Kobayashi's background, I think it's pretty clear with just a couple bullet points why something of this particular theme, kind of questioning hierarchy and tradition, really resonated with him. He went to college and was a student of art and philosophy, then was drafted into World War II. And I found this interesting anecdote where he, while serving in the Japanese imperial forces during World War II, he refused promotion and remained a private the entire war. Because, again, it's a rejection of hierarchy here. He later would reflect on World War II as, what did he say this here? Quote, the culmination of human evil. I think that's kind of a roundly justifiable perspective, but also from a Japanese perspective, you've got some pretty horrific, you've got some out and out horrific, human rights atrocities that were being committed as well. He describes himself as a pacifist and a socialist, and was also a POW for 1 year, which is actually his last year, I think, serving in the armed forces there on the Japanese side. I think that really speaks to why a film like this would really resonate with someone who has that particular educational background, but also war experience as well.
And that echoes through basically his entire filmography.
Yeah.
And we mentioned The Human Condition, which is about the experience of a Japanese soldier during the war.
Yeah.
Samurai Rebellion is playing on these sorts of themes. But yeah, no, I mean, this is this is exactly who's going to do this movie.
And you can also sort of see how, like, maybe because obviously Hashimoto has worked with Kurosawa at this point when he wrote the screenplay. I don't. It's been a while since I really dug in on Kurosawa, but I feel like some of the themes within this story don't really hit me the way some of the themes that Kurosawa really plays with. Like they're not really in his wheelhouse, in Kurosawa's.
Kurosawa does social criticism, and like I said, they share a certain a humanism. Neither of them. I mean, I think you could say Kobayashi is feels. I don't know how he classified himself at this point as a left-wing director. He feels closer to being one, but his films are not openly, or this one at least specifically, is not openly left-wing exactly, which is true with Kurosawa as well. But I think that Kurosawa does not attack hierarchy in the same way.
Right.
Right. Kurosawa, actually, authority figures can be reformed. And in this film, they can't.
That's a good point.
And it's structural. There's a structural critique in this film, which is also true in Kurosawa, actually. I mean, I think that there certainly is. I mean, if you watch Akiru as the critique of bureaucracy is not is not an individualistic one.
Right.
But no, I don't. I think that the head-on attack at hierarchy. I mean, Seven Samurai is seen as sort of this quintessential samurai movie, sort of from the outside, but it's actually not. Right, the samurai in that are actually not quintessential samurai, and the way that they fight in that film is not quintessential, beautiful artistic dueling, which actually you sort of see in this one. Right,
Yeah.
It's hack and slash the whole way through. So both of them, in a sense, have made films that demystify samurai and in some ways jab at this sort of post samurai era film, turning them into sort of these the sort of the idealized version of the of samurai for the purpose of social commentary, including about the present. But once again, just the sharpness of Kobayashi, the level critique and the sort of unremittingness of it, I think is just very different.
Oh, for sure. And which isn't to say also that Kurosawa wouldn't have probably directed the shit out of this screenplay if he took a swing at it. But I don't know. I think it resonated just the right way with Kobayashi, that like it just, you get a magnum opus like this out of him.
Yeah, this is his material, and I think, I think this is the right lead as well.
Right. Oh, for sure. Just all the right combination of things came together, including then also the cinematographer, Yoshio Miyajima, who worked with Kobayashi for a huge chunk of his career. He's also the cinematographer for Human Condition and Quite On. I thought it was interesting. Also, he was the cinematographer with Oshima on Empire of Passion, which I haven't seen, but Oshima is going to come up shortly here because we cannot talk about some parts of this film without mentioning Night and Fog in Japan. So it's just fascinating, the overlap here of like again, just every time you check out more of the credits on any of these films, you're just like, it's an embarrassment of talent and riches here. And it's no wonder it's such an amazing and strong and powerful run of films in the Japanese film industry for just decades here. The other one I wanted to mention, which I think we'll mention as we kind of go, there's certain scenes here that have just the most interesting and just flat out perfect use of a new style of music to really accent the scenes in really interesting ways. The composer for this one is Toru Takemitsu, who
Mm.
I read a little bit about. I read, I think I found like a film comment article that kind of dug in a little bit to his past about how he was a composer and he was also a writer on aesthetics and music theory. So in my mind, like, oh, this guy's a music geek. Like whatever it takes to put together the right composition to get the right emotions, this guy's going to do. He founded as he was one of the founders of an art collective that was focusing on putting music front and center because art with social relevance to everyday life is what makes you want to wake up and create in the morning and live. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
that is just the perfect attitude to have going into scoring any film, I think, in particular, but creating any kind of composition. There is even a Kobayashi interview. I think it's on the Criterion channel. It may have been one I watched on YouTube, where he mentions giving his composer here for this particular film, like, oh, I really want a piece right here. And then the composer's like, this scene is 15 seconds. What do you want me to create? How do I create an emotional like arc that really ties us all together? And you don't want it to be too overbearing. And it ended up being like four notes on a I don't know, guitar or on a like what like it was just so minimal. And he's like, oh, that's perfect. He was like, oh, all right, here we go. So it wasn't like it's not an overwrought score here. Sometimes it's just like a note here and there within a scene where just like it's just a perfect little punctuation to really nail either what the character is doing or what the composition's telling you or what that beat in the story needs to be. It never leads you emotionally. It just helps you get there emotionally, which I guess is a different way to say lead you. And that's not what I mean, but I don't know if I'm not a music guy, so I feel like I'm ill equipped to describe
It
great music.
manipulates you in just the right way, which is
Yeah,
what films do.
maybe that's what it is.
It
It does lead you the right way without like forcing you to feel that emotion. It leads you to that climactic scene or that little beat rather than just telling you, "Oh, hey, here's the beat."
right.
Just carries you right through it.
Like with a lot of samurai films in this era, I feel like, I mean, there's a combination of sort of Western film orientate or instrumentation, and then sort of probably more traditional Japanese instruments, and the use, especially of percussion, to both create tension
Hmm.
and to release it and to sort of punctuate violence and action is, I mean, some of the greatest in film history.
Yes.
It's just, it captures, and yeah, like we should talk, make sure we talk about the action in this movie thoroughly, because it's beautifully done and different than, I don't know, most samurai films I've seen.
So I think what do you want to start with? Just a quick overview plot for those that are unfamiliar with this film or like, oh, I remember that title, but what the fuck is that one about?
Yeah, and I should just say, spoilers. Yes, I know this movie is 60 years old, but not everything. The film's plot unravels very intentionally, and so I just want to give give listeners fair warning that knowing things ahead of time is fine. It will still be a great movie, but you know there are surprises.
I will second that because you did not spoil anything about this movie before I watched it. And as somebody who just watched it for the first time a few days ago, the way that it unfolds and reveals the ins and outs of the story, if I knew all of that ahead of time, I still would have loved it. It doesn't take anything away from it. But oh my gosh, there's just some great little discoveries if you want to watch this with that, but before we start talking about it and telling you everything. So what do we got here, Isaac? What's give me this plot in one sentence.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
I huh, okay. So, in Edo era Japan under the sorry. No, in Edo era Japan in the early 17th century, only, 15 or so years. I mean, I guess 18, what is it, 1630, basically after the Takagawa shogunate has successfully defeated its other warlord rivals, and basically, created a government over all of Japan, thus creating a period of long centuries of peace, in which warriors are no longer needed. A samurai, a weathered samurai named Tsukumo, shows up at the Aya clan's compound, I believe in Edo. So part of what's going to be happening here is that a clan will have two. Well, they'll have their domains, right? And then they will also have a mansion in Edo. and the Lord is expected to spend part of the time in Edo and part of it out. And a sort of chief counselor will run things in either one of those places when the Lord is not there. So just to get a sense of it, so I believe this is in their place in Edo. A weathered samurai arrives, basically asking to be able to commit seppuku, or ritual suicide, in which you disembowel yourself, and then cut off your head, and have your head cut off by a second in the courtyard of the palace. The senior counselor, in order to deter this, while pointing out that that basically there's been a plague of Ronin that is masterless samurai, and we'll get into why there's so many masterless samurai. Basically, doing this to extort, to extort from samurai clans, basically by causing trouble by saying I want to commit seppuku, and then like those samurai clans, in order to just get them out of the way, just give them some money. I'm screwing this up here, aren't I? I'm just gonna babble.
No, it makes sense so far. It's that's the setup, and it's good context too, just to know like what's going on. Like there are so many of these Ronin out there now, because there's just been so many clans that have been dissolved, because there's no need for warriors anymore. We're in this time of peace, that it is like there's just so many out there that realize, like, once you realize, oh, you can just go to the stores and be like, oh, I want to commit seppuku here, and you can get a few alms and be on your way, because also like these people are poor.
So it's the reason they're actually it's not because it's a time of peace. It's actually that their clans are being dissolved because the Takagawa shogunate is actually being incredibly strict with the daimyo, or feudal lords. So, like, we'll get into the story of Sagumo, but you'll see that there, because they committed infraction, which they didn't realize was an infraction, and get disbarred for that, and their lord gets exiled. So it's that there's actually there's a certain degree of political repression toward. Well, it makes perfect sense. The Takagawa shogunate doesn't want any other clan to gain enough power to be a threat to them.
Right.
But basically, the chief counselor Saito recounts the story of another Ronin originally from the same clan as Sagumo, though Sagumo says he doesn't know this person, who attempted a suicide bluff, but who have been foolish enough to have sold his swords, which are the soul of a samurai, the soul of a warrior, and which would never, for some of from their class within the sort of feudal system of Japan, would never have given up. He, and this person had only had bamboo practice swords left. He had given up his swords, and they had forced him to commit seppuku as opposed to giving him money, which is what he'd expected, with the bamboo.
Ouch.
Right.
We'll get there.
Sagumo says, this is not a problem for me. My swords are very real. I'm very serious. This is what I plan to do. And just as the ceremony is about to begin, Sagumo asks specifically for 3 different samurai, the leading swordsmen of the clan, to be his seconds, because in order for the ceremony to be effective in him going to the afterlife, for him to retain his honor, right? He has reached this point. This is a ritual suicide in which there's a situation in which you could be dishonored, and this will restore it. This death will restore it, but it needs to be a clean cut. He needs to know that the skills of this person are good. And I think one of the things, so we're going to get into the themes, but throughout, what the Aya clan, for instance, when they force force Mutomo, the poor guy with the bamboo swords, to commit seppuku, it is to retain their martial vigor. It is actually purely outward facing, to retain face. They look at those clans that have given charity to these Ronin as giving up on sort of the martial, on the honor and martial vigor,
Mm-hmm.
and dispelling their damaging their reputations. But their clan is known for their valor and for their samurai ethics, and they're not going to allow that to happen to them. They were not going to allow themselves to be a laughingstock. And that's sort of the subtext throughout this. So basically, as each of these three samurai have all who are all the same samurai who had helped to coerce Motomo into committing seppuku with bamboo. All three of them appear to be ill, and while we're waiting to find out what's happened, basically runners are sent off to find out what happened to them. Tsugumo offers to tell the story of his life, so that even though he is lowered in status, like a ronin is not a respectable position, right? And that's why he's committing seppuku, that perhaps there might be some lessons. And he starts to pull out the first knife in this, because he points out that, basically his fate could be theirs in the future, which the counselor scoffs at, right?
Mhm.
How could this happen to me? How could this happen to us? Because of course we are worthy, and our honor and our house would never fall. Basically, what Tsukumo tells the story of is his clan is disbarred by the shogun in 1619, and what it sounds like what has happened is that they were rebuilding their ancestral castle, and they did so in a way which angered the shogunate, which makes sense. There are going to be very tight regulations on the building of fortresses, for obvious reasons why the central government would be angry about this, but apparently this was not understood at the time. And Tsugumo's best friend commits seppuku. But it appears that both of them were involved in the project, but he commits seppuku basically to prevent Tsugumo from doing so first. And their superior, who also commits seppuku, basically both of them bid Tsugumo to take care of his best friend's son, who is Motom, who basically the guy who we had already seen recounted commit seppuku with bamboo, who've been forced to do this. And basically, Tsugumo's daughter Miho and Motomo get married. They have a son named Kingo, and what you see is basically a beautiful, sort of beautiful, idyllic, poor, downtrodden family life. And Motomo, Tsugumo has chances, for instance, to use the beauty of his daughter to get her in as a concubine for another samurai household, which could then potentially get him into an official position, once again. But he won't do that. He would rather be a poor maker of umbrellas than use his daughter in such a way. So you see these images of a simple life, of sort of a human image beyond the standards of the rigid standards of samurai life. But unfortunately, first his daughter becomes ill, and they're desperate for money, and then Kingo, his grandson, becomes ill, and Motomo goes off saying that he will find a moneylender who he knows, who used to be a samurai, who might be able to help with this, help with their situation. He disappears, and a few days later, he is brought by the three samurai who originally coerced him, and who in the present Tsugumo had asked as his seconds, and his death is mocked. His body is left there, and eventually Tsugumo's daughter and grandson die as well. And as they die, Tsugumo realizes that Motomo had sold off his swords, but he had never imagined doing that. So, I mean, I think this is part of the structural critique of the movie. I mean, we see that the capriciousness of the shogunate's policies leave thousands of samurai in a precarious economic position. We see the limits of what they can do. We see them being trapped economically, but we also see that Tsugumo realizes that he's been trapped by the samurai system, because if he'd sold his swords, they might have been able to get a doctor and they might have been able to save his family, but he didn't even think of it. He'd been socialized at such a point that he hasn't even imagined doing such a thing. Finishing his story, Tsugumo reveals before the Aya estate that he'd actually tracked down the three samurai, Hayato and Amunosuk, please excuse my horrible, horrible pronunciation, and taken their top knots. He was then visited by the third of these three samurai, the only one. Both of them, in the flashbacks that we see of the fighting, are shown to be incompetent, and in one case, just purely cowardly in combat, not living up to the supposed standards of the Aya clan in any way, shape, or form. And then Hikakoru, who's is the only one who actually is a serious swordmaster and actually like knows what he's doing, and is basically calls Tsugumo out, and they have. We'll talk about the visuals of this duel. One of the most beautiful duels probably ever put to screen. But Tsugumo is an actually experienced combatant, whereas Hikakoru has never actually fought in actual combat, despite all of his skills, and he takes his top knot as well. And so it is revealed that the honor of the clan is a sham, because here are these three men, that to have your top knot taken is to have your head taken, right? It's completely dishonorable to have your top knot taken, and all three should have committed Harakiri on the spot, but instead they pretend to be sick while their top knots can regrow. He questions honor and Bushido, the way of the samurai, completely, and rejects it openly, and points that though Motomo had done something wrong, they had not even bothered to ask him why he was so desperate. Why would he sell his swords? And that this had been done wrong. He critiques them. He critiques openly in a voice of authority the Aya clan, and Saito the counselor orders his death, in which we then see a harrowing battle throughout the mansion as dozens of samurai attempt to take Tsugumo down. He kills 4. He seriously injures 8. But part of what it's convincing, because they know that he's already defeated 3 master swordsmen from their clan. Nobody really wants to get that close to this guy. That's the thing, is they're circling around, but nobody wants to get that close. They finally bring in musketeers to finish him off. And then as the film closes, as we read sort of the journal or the chronicle of the clan, it's clear, and Saito tells his underlings this, that all of this will be covered up, that every samurai who died here, including the 3 who will all have to commit harakiri, Hikokuro actually already did, all of them will officially have died of illness, and that in the chronicle, that the clan will present itself as handing this in a perfectly honorable fashion. And the final scene is of the household armor, which is a lot of symbolic value in the film, and which Tsugumo had literally used as a shield, rebuilt, and perfectly as it was before. And the film closes. Sorry, that ended up being a little longer than...
Well, to quote The Big Lebowski, which is an odd thing to do when you're talking about this particular film, there's a lot of ins and outs in the plot that's going on here. So as a first-time watcher, I'm clicking play on this, and all I know is that it's about a Ronin who goes to the local clan, the local mansion, basically, that they're in here, and requests to commit seppuku in the traditional ceremony in their courtyard, and that's the movie. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that's intriguing. I'm on board, but it's like, that's also going to be 2 hours and 13 minutes. And that's what really floored me on first watch is the structure here. And like you said, it takes a minute to kind of explain the ins and outs there, but the structure of it is fantastic. So you have Tsugomo as the Ronin, like requesting this ritual here, and in order to let him know that this what this clan is about, and they're not just going to hand him some alms and send him on his way. He's like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here. I'm for real. Tells him the story that at this point with Motomo and the bamboo swords, it tells him that it's just a way to be like, oh no, we're for real here, and you're like, oh shit, and then you see that flashback to what happened in the bamboo swords, and oh my god, that is a brutal scene. And then, like we said at the start of the show, the reveal and the way the narrative works here does just unfold in just such a specific and precise way for maximum impact on the audience. You realize that that poor guy with the bamboo swords, yeah, that's a horrific scene, and it's really, it pulls at your heartstrings. Like, oh god, like, okay, but like we said, we see Sugomo is very serious about this, and you're like, oh wow, he's in the courtyard ready to commit seppuku within, like, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the movie. And you're like, wait, where are we going here? And then once you get his life story, you get that whole flashback. And then that's when you add in, oh, this guy knows the first guy. He might be here for a reason. But also his story and his life is so compelling because you've seen, as we mentioned before, like he is a grizzled, broken down, just emotionally crippled, Ronin now. Like he is clearly at the end of his rope. And then you get this awesome contrast as far as an acting performance goes when you see him around like his daughter and then his son-in-law, or who becomes his son-in-law, Matome. And then also you see him as a grandpa, and he's this doting grandpa on Kingo, and wants to, as soon as he's awake, he's picking him up and he's playing with him. He's making goofy faces, and you can just see like the joy, and you realize, oh shit, wait, this is not going to end well. I know where this is going. And the way that the narrative just so seamlessly goes back to like, oh, wait, now we're in a flashback point here. Okay, now we're back to the present day. Now we're going to a different flashback. And then when you think the whole thing is done, you get this other built-in flashback where he goes and finds and has taken the top knots of the three samurai who took his son-in-law's life. It's so beautiful. Like it's not a contrived bit of like flashback narrative structure at all. And it doesn't feel like it's holding information from you, which I think you can get sometimes in these flashbacks structures. It's not holding information from you at all in order to reveal it like in an aha moment later on. It just sort of, it's so naturally and beautifully unfolds. You're like, oh wait, yeah, what is going on here? And then you get to see it, and you're like, oh wow, that's amazing. And like, oh wait, what is going on? And then you get to see a little bit more. It's just such perfectly timed and paced storytelling that immediately, as you're an audience member going like, oh wait, what is going on there? Oh, now we get to see it. And it leads you so expertly through this narrative for like the most maximum emotional punch when you really are finally aware of what is fully going on. I don't know, you couldn't have more beautifully and perfectly set up that final battle scene. And like you even just said there, it hadn't even occurred to me that everyone who's listening to this story knows that this guy knows that Sugomo is a master samurai, and they're part of a clan that really just has practiced a lot. They're not a battle-hardened group.
Well, part of it, I mean, it's a generational thing.
Generational, right? So we're just far enough into the Inu era that they haven't been. I guess actually even says like battle tested, or he has a line about samurai honor is nothing but a facade. Well, we'll get into that in a second. But he talks about how swordsmanship untested in battle is like the art of swimming mastered on dry land. And then you see him go up against these other samurai. And you're like you said, one of them is just like, he's as good as I would be. Like he's terrible. And then, it does set up this final showdown, which the way you described it, I hadn't really thought of it that way. But yeah, like no one wants to just jump in and take this guy out because they're like, well, fuck, I am no match for this guy.
Nobody wants to be the first one in there. I mean, they're all holding it decent, but it's so. I think the structure of this film is. It's so easy for flashbacks to break momentum in a film, and instead it builds the momentum.
Yes, exactly.
And it's really impressive. And that's because you tell a engrossing human story that gives meaning to everything else that you're seeing.
Yeah.
And so much of it has to do, honestly, with the way that they, for me, it's that story and the way that they shoot Nokada's face, and the way he does the acting, the blankness and and despair that he brings to that, and like you said, the contrast with how we get there. I mean, he's incredibly intimidating, right? um, I mean, it's one of the most stunning performances I've ever seen. Let's
Wait,
let's talk. Yeah,
one quick second. 'Cause that didn't register, but yeah, the way you just described that too, when you see him like asking for, "Can I use your courtyard?" and commit seppuku, he just looks hollow.
yeah,
Like there's just nothing there. And then you contrast that with the joy he has around his daughter and then eventually his son-in-law and his grandson versus the showdown scene, even when he takes the last top knot in the actual duel, like the specific movement that he has and the way his body moves, you were like, "Oh, I'm scared of this guy." I'm like, and I didn't feel that at all when he's like around his grandson. And it's completely different level of passion than when he was just hollowed out and ready to die.
right.
The range is just incredible.
The range is incredible, and the arc is shown perfectly, and it flows perfectly into the themes, which I wanted to jump
Yeah,
into.
sorry, go ahead.
So part of it is like I sort of said in the probably overly long synopsis, um, basically, this is a film in which the Ai Clan represents a structural facade of an ideological facade of how things are supposed to work, and it's a cruel one, and it's a hypocritical one at its heart. They have presented themselves as the epitome of samurai honor, and what this movie argues through Tsugumo is not just that they're hypocrites, but that system of honor is bullshit. That it's built on cruelty and a rigidity in the face of the weak, while in the back room breaking its own rules for its own interests. At the same time that structural forces oppress and make it incredibly difficult for people to survive. And so, they can be cruel to poor Ronin who have been, for no reason, for no fault of their own, forced out into the streets, having to work where they can, but because of the rigid class structure, it's actually even more difficult for them to do so, because they're not supposed to be doing this, right? They're not supposed to be doing the work of peasants or merchants or peddlers. So what part of it is, what you have is I think a fairly comprehensive uh, structural critique of the system, because it is not just that it is hypocritical, it is that it is cruel in itself.
Yeah.
That it is an anti-human ideology, and that the way of the samurai is ultimately hollow in the face of actual human life and needs.
And one of the ways I really love that Kobayashi, or presumably Tashimoto as a screenwriter here, they really illustrate this is the very opening image of the film and the very last image of the film are basically the official what's the pronunciation? I clan?
I kind I my pronunciation.
IYI or I
Yeah,
yeah. So the official clan basically history book is being read from at the beginning of it. Like they turn a page and then we see the whole story, and at the end of it we see the official recording that Saito dictates, saying like, "Oh well, they all died of illness, and this none of this actually happened." So like the official history book that the clan is documenting there captures none of the reality that we just saw.
it's it's chilling, right?
Yeah,
And it begins both with the family's sort of ceremonial armor, with the clan's ceremonial armor as well. Like you
yeah,
see that image, an image of sort of the continuity in the face of ongoing hypocritical continuity and cruel continuity in the face of everything that we've seen in the film, and the sort of the devastated lives, and it doesn't matter. The structural imperative of the Klan as an institution goes on, and the need to maintain that is more important than anything else.
At
The
all
facade.
costs. Yeah.
This is I think a controversial film when it came out. It's also unusually violent. It's not particularly by Japanese standards even a few years later, but as I understand it, I mean, I think that the scene of specifically Matomo attempting to disembowel himself, I'm saying names wrong, disembowel himself with bamboo is harrowing today because of the way it's acted.
Oh yes, and it is a black and white cinematography, but the way the blood runs, like down the bamboo blade on him at one point when he's trying to commit seppuku with the bamboo blade, he also bites off his tongue.
Yeah.
I'm guessing in an attempt to bleed out quicker because he's not getting any
It's
help
an
from
attempt,
from the second.
it's considered cowardly because he's
Right,
trying to kill himself without completing the disembowelment.
right.
Because
But at that point, like he's clearly in so much pain. You're just like, dude, this needs to end because he's not getting help with the decapitation from the second, the other samurai standing by on the side.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is I think you choke on the blood. Maybe I'm not sure.
Could be, but I mean, again, we're talking about 1963 here, or sorry, the film was from 62. We'll get to 63 and why I said that in just a moment. But no, it was shockingly brutal because, and not from like I'm trying to think of the way to, not from like a horror movie sort of standpoint, because it's the brutal reality of you're trying to kill yourself with a bamboo sword, and that's rough and it's bloody and it's messy. Um, there was a one of the interviews I watched with Kobayashi. He was talking about when the film went to Cannes Film Festival, and that scene specifically in 1963 when it played at the Cannes Film Festival. There are other films that were playing there, like The Leopard, The Birds, To Kill a Mockingbird, Eight and a Half, This Sporting Life, which also has a fair amount of brutality in it. He said that at the bamboo seppuku scene, the audience was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it was very like they were having a reaction to the depiction of violence on there. But he said by the end of the film, they were more just weeping because like you don't really know the full story of why he's doing this. It may even appear as it did to me like is this just being violent to show how violent this really can be or how bloody this can be. But it's one of those on second watch, like it's going to hurt even more to watch emotionally because I know that whole story now.
So to go back to like the structural critique of the film,
Yeah.
So this takes down the image of feudal Japan, and it's an anti-samurai film,
Yes.
right? A lot of critics have said that. How does it relate to the present of the film that it's in? Kobayashi had pointed to the student protests against treaties with the U.S. a year before, which we actually discussed during our summer of the 60s several years ago, because it's one of the major elements of Night and Fog in Japan, right?
It's the plot.
It's the plot of Night and Fog in Japan. It's dealing with
Yeah.
the aftermath of the devastating aftermath of that protest movement. So he's pointing out there's a point where a lot of people, and certainly somebody who's on the left, which I think broadly he is,
Yeah.
are feeling like politics is sort of pointless. So that certainly plays with this movie, right? But those are two layered critiques. I think it can also play into critique of Japan, wartime Japan. And it can play in a critique of present day Japan in terms of the rigidity of the corporate structure and the hypocrisies therein, and the dominant society in Japan in the early 60s, as it starts to flow into its great economic post-war boom. But it's actually a critique that really can be layered onto any hierarchical, exploitative society, I think.
Yeah. Well, any hierarchical system that is, I would kind of argue that they almost all are built on hypocrisy, but that have inherent hypocrisy in how they are, implementing laws, how it's any part of that society is being run. Yeah. As long as there is any kind of an injustice going on, you can kind of read that into this film as a metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, and in the specific ways that people are trapped by structures. So this is a film in which you're economically dispossessed through no fault of your own by political caprice, and then you are entrapped by a system which gloats about its own virtue, but that virtue in itself, that ideology, is built on incredible cruelty, and ignoring the structural reality of itself, and being hypocritical even by its own standards, all at the same time. This is what I mean about this as being a savage critique, right?
Yeah.
I can't think of Kurosawa ever. I haven't seen all of Kurosawa's films, uh, ever going this hard in his social critique. But this leaves basically nothing standing, but sort of a humanist vision of life, which is an interesting thing. So, like, I mean, one of the things is this a leftist film? It's not incompatible, but it's not. It isn't inherently. I think sort of the humanism is one that a lot of leftists would sort of like, well, yeah, but also could fit. But it also, it's not. It's a bleak one, in terms of sort of, it's not offering political solutions either.
Right, which I don't think good leftist films necessarily have to offer solutions. It could also just be diagnostic, maybe more like in a John Sayles kind of way.
Right.
But also, since we just mentioned Night and Fog in Japan by Oshima, I was like, oh, it's a bit more really overt in dealing with, like, I mean, you have overtly political and leftist characters dealing with like political memory and the dynamics of social movements and things like that going on in that story. I feel that this one, I think you're right, leans more into the humanist nature, but I don't know. My initial reaction would be like, yeah, it does have at its heart kind of a leftist perspective. I think I would put it in that category myself.
Fair.
Because
Yeah, no,
I think okay, so part of what really grabs me here, and I don't know if this defends what I just said or not, but Tsugomo, if you know the whole story, going back and watching this a second time, I mean, it's definitely a film I'm going to be revisiting and revisiting and revisiting. As much as we can say, it is a masterwork of the, example of like the art of film and what the art of film can do. It's also one of those movies where you really don't know the full story until you get to the almost basically the end of the movie. Like once you get to that final, because you really even get to that final battle scene, and basically the story of Tsugomo and what he's gone through the whole time, but you really don't get even till the very end of the movie when you see like them writing the official history in the book, and the armor has been the hollow armor, as speaking of museum pieces, has been rebuilt and is now back on display again, and the final top knot has been cleaned up out of the courtyard area. That's when you finally realize, oh, this is all just being swept under the rug. The entire and awesome manipulated and maneuvering plot that Tsugomo puts into motion by going and requesting to commit seppuku in their courtyard is him the whole time manipulating everyone exactly the way he wants them to act and react and be manipulated in order to create this ultimate moral dilemma that he's hoping will torture all of their consciousnesses, which unfortunately doesn't, because they're the ones who took his son-in-law's life and left, his daughter and his grandson were already pretty ill, but, a couple of alms that would have helped out. It's too late. So basically his life is ruined because of this sham hierarchy that the clan is continuing to propagate.
Yeah. I think that's the him is sort of having maneuvered them all
right where he wants them to be, right
where he wants them to be. And I'm stealing this from somewhere else. I can't remember, maybe one of the reviews I read, but there's like a duel of decorum between him and the counselor.
Yeah.
Where they're sort of both using samurai norms to sort of outmaneuver the other.
Yeah.
That in itself isn't really engaging, because you're sort of like, what maneuver is each one going to do next?
Yeah, and the maneuvering, I almost was looking at it as also just because I mentioned also playing at the Cannes Film Festival in 63 was To Kill a Mockingbird. The maneuvering he has is he's telling his life story and they're waiting for the couriers to return to let them know what's with these other three samurai, what's going on here. And he has the space to tell this story. It and the kind of the decorum you were just talking about there, it really has the feeling of almost like a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
Like nobody's officially on trial here, but it really has like some of the narrative beats of like revealing the story and is he gonna get away here or whatever, because Sugomo doesn't come in. I mean, he has a line at the kind of the climactic speech he has about samurai honor is nothing but a facade, and he starts pulling out the top knots and telling those stories. He doesn't just walk right in and first get a meeting and just start throwing down the top knots and calling everything a facade. He gets everybody, he builds to that by manipulating everybody and kind of creating the environment where everyone is surrounded. Because even about partway through, I believe it's about partway through, Saito calls out like all the guards, like everybody draws their weapons. And so he has everybody basically in this clan is now out and listening to his story. Like he draws everyone out and then hears it. Actually, I guess it kind of does come to the end he may have been hoping for.
I mean, it's not clear. I mean, he certainly, I think he got a lot of what he wanted out of this initially. There's not much he can do after he's dead.
But I don't picture him as like wanting to keep on living either.
Yeah, no, this is him. Well, part of it is this. At the final moment before they shoot him, he begins to commit seppuku.
Right, exactly. On his own
He
terms.
actually does commit seppuku, which in a certain sense he doesn't. Though he's rejected the way of the samurai, he still commits seppuku because he's he's a creature of that world, right? He's been shaped by it completely, and that he's ready.
So
now that he's cut his way through the house, damaged the household, the household sort of family armor. I mean, now, and he's ready to go. But he probably hoped for more of a reckoning than, a cover up. I don't know.
Well, because he doesn't know the cover up's happening, and maybe, and I don't know if this was his intention, but maybe like what he did is going to stick with the people who are around. Because even one of the final images, you see them cleaning up the courtyard, and one of the people that works there within the clan picks up the last top knot and puts it in like the cleanup bucket. So like the people that the samurai that live within this clan know what happened. Whether or not they'll do anything doesn't really matter. But what his death really brought to my mind was something that we brought up when we were talking about the Yakuza Noir episodes with Tokyo Drifter and It Called As My Passport. Will we ever find honor in these films? There's so much emphasis on like the honor code. And I felt like we finally were feeling a little bit of that with Sugomo because like it means something to him. Now, granted, he has some reckoning, like you mentioned with the swords when they bring back Motome's body and he sees the bamboo swords and he grabs his. Oh, it's a great shot too. It's just like him grabbing the sword, his own actual like metal sword, kind of sitting off to the side. And he's like, this stupid thing was so dear to me. I clung to it. And he's realizing I could have just sold this like my son-in-law did. And we would have maybe had the money for medicine.
Well, this is a world. So we're talking about two different systems. We're talking about that of the Yakuza, like the, criminal gangs and then samurai. Mm-hmm. And both of them have their own codes. And basically what we're saying is in any Yakuza movie we've never seen actually anybody stick to this. I'm sure there's lots of Yakuza movies, but we have not seen it. It's always about a generational shift and sort of like capitalist rot.
Right.
In this case, everyone lives strictly by the code and yet is also hypocritical. So part of it is the code is absolutely shaping social norm. It's not that it's been pushed aside at a generational level, though you could argue maybe the film is implying that this used to be followed more before peacetime, but that the code itself is wrong. Whether you're hypocritical about it or not, it's still wrong. Mm-hmm. And rigidly and brutally applied. But that it's actually the code itself is deployed as a tool of power. So because the Aya clan uses their reputation is a key part of their power in their broader society, and so it must be maintained. So I think it's actually a very different it's a very different relationship. Whereas one, it's like old school gangsters being pushed aside by new school gangsters. Which is actually a story you see in lots of places in lots of gangster films.
Mhm.
Oh, they're so much more ruthless. In this case, it's that the code is foundational to society, and both being hypocritical of it and also following it are both tools of maintaining power. But it's unavoidable.
Yeah. I feel like additionally within this one, you've got Sugomo obviously questioning his role
Mm.
within this particular system, but maybe by the time he commits seppuku at the very end of his part of the story, almost basically the end of the film as well, that I don't know. I guess I got the impression that that meant something to him as his character. Obviously, he's not going to survive. It's either like they're going to take me out, or I'll just decide to take myself out.
I mean, he's openly attacked it and he's rejected it. At the same time, that it does shape who he is, right? I mean, it shaped his entire life.
Yeah, yeah. And whether or not he believes like in what they're doing. He's like, well, this is still how I have lived my life. Or I mean, or I wonder if it's as simple as like, I'm not giving you the satisfaction of you killed me.
Yeah, I think it's more that. I mean, I think he's rejected it, right? He is attacked it as false and hollow and cruel. So by this point, I mean, and
Yeah.
he's realized that his attachment to it, even after becoming a Ronin, led to his led in a sense to the doth to the doth to the help to the death of his family.
Right.
Because if he'd sold his swords, maybe that would have been enough money for a doctor.
Right.
But it was beyond his
Didn't even occur to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to mention a little bit more in depth on the when Sugomo was challenged to a duel?
Let's talk about the fighting in this movie. I mean, so basically Hakakoru, who is the one of the three samurai who is actually kind of not a hypocrite, because he initially says that he's sick, but he actually does commit seppuku. We don't see this, it's off screen, but maybe realizing that he's being found out. But he's the one who openly challenges Tsugumo, as opposed to being cowardly about it, and is able to fight him well. And so they have a duel.
Well, it's sort of interesting. Before the duel, like Hikaru goes to Sugumo's home and challenges him there, and even mentions like, "Well, I can't draw my blade here," because he's in just this tiny little, shack basically. He's like, "Well, if I swing here, I'm going to hit that. If I swing here, I'm going to hit that." So like, this isn't a place, and does the actual challenge to a duel, and then following a bit of an honor code, still they just like walk to this field together. And I didn't really pay attention too much to the acting on the way to the duel because I was too distracted by how fucking gorgeous the bamboo forest they're walking through, the cemetery they start off in, like walking through. Nothing foreshadowing there, but I was like, I wrote in my notes like, man, you could pause every scene as they're just walking to this field to have a duel, and I could blow it up to a poster, and it'd be just gorgeous. Another example of how just like basically a transition scene in any other movie, just walking to where the action's going to happen, completely riveting.
Well, but part of it is, I don't know this, but the sound effects that they're using and the light that they're doing reminds me, I don't know if it's invoking ghosts, maybe? They're walking through a cemetery.
Yeah. And then the howling of the wind.
And the howling of the wind, and the background noise and the way the music is going reminds me of basically sort of ghost noises in other Japanese films I've seen. So I think like that's what's being invoked. And then they get to a field with ceremony. They duel among the Buddhas, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Buddha statues.
Yep.
And it's part of it is this is a movie that gets to eat its, like have its cake and eat it too, because this is a rejection of the samurai film while doing like a very classic samurai duel, it feels like, in that scene, and a really beautiful one.
That's a really good way to put it. But also it really struck me that, like I've seen actually even Takashi Miike did a remake of this one, but if you look at what is it, like Blood of the Immortal or Blade of the Immortal. Like there's other more like modern ones that just revel in like the sword play and the action, and that's fine. I've enjoy the pleasures of genre films as much as anybody else. But this one, the way that this duel is filmed, it felt like they were actually filming like with real swords.
Mm.
Like it's not like it's not like too much sword play. It's like very careful, like positioning against your opponent and then taking a couple lunges, then backing off. And it it keeps you so oriented into the action in this particular scene that you even like I've never been in a sword fight. Like I even noticed when he's like repositioning like to be downwind.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of expert cinematography, editing, acting, and choreography, it's never just a bunch of like quick shots of like swords clanging together and all this. Like it's a couple of quick, thrusts or parries or whatever, and then a little back off, then a little movement here, and then a repositioning. It's just you feel totally oriented, and it feels like that's probably how a sword duel would play out.
I mean, this is actually very different than, let's say, your Seven Samurai thing, where very little technique is applied. Basically, there's a lot of hack and slash.
Right.
Both of these are they're shown to be using techniques from their particular schools
Right.
and trying. And so part of it is, I mean, what they say about great battles. Is if you're watching martial arts movies or anything, and a samurai movie is a martial arts movie, right? These are forms of martial art. Is does it tell a story? The battle in itself, does it tell a story as each of the opponents works to figure the other one out?
Yeah.
And that's like one of the big tests for whether an action scene is great. And this is a stupendous action scene. It is it is a multi-layered story, but if you just take it at the level of the battle, there's an absolute story going on here.
Well, I was going to say, actually, even outside of it, if you do take in the context, one of them is trying to kill the other person, and we know for a fact the other one, in this case, our hero here, Sugomo, is just going for the top knot.
Right.
He wants to best him.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that, which is much harder to do.
Yes.
Which adds another layer of drama to it.
Because we've already known that because he confronts him. Hikokaru confronts Sugomo at his house because he knows the other two have already been bested, I guess, and have lost their top knots. So,
yeah,
yep.
Then there is a second battle scene in the film, which is worth getting into, which is the final fight within the castle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this absolutely brutal, frantic stop and start fight in which, for most of it, it feels like Sugomo was actually falling practically the whole time. He's, a lot of it, I mean, he's barely standing because he's starting to get injured slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But you also see him once again, it tells a story because he's maneuvering them.
Right.
Each one he maneuvers, one of them, there's a point where one of them attempts to go in. You see how he gets them. He continues. He gets blood all over the clan's crest.
Oh, it's so good.
It's like, hey, did you get the point of this film? Subtle? No, we're not being subtle here at all.
Well, not to interrupt again, but actually to go back to how this scene starts, I thought it was just spectacular because I wasn't sure we were going to see this finale on screen. Again, I'm first time watcher here. I know you've seen it a couple times, but when Saito says, "All right, take him out. We're done with this nonsense. Just kill this guy," we follow him and a couple of his minions out of the scene. So, like, Saito's the main counselor here. He goes into an inner room, and we're with them. And from his point of view, we hear the final battle start off. And I was like, wait, we're gonna hear the climax from this guy's point of view. We're not gonna get to see it. And it kind of hangs them for a minute to realize, like, oh, this guy is, I don't know, like, so cowardly or whatever. Like, he's just having his minions do it. He's not even hanging around to watch it or helping or participating. He just hightails it in and takes cover. And then we go back and we see this whole amazingly choreographed scene that just goes on and on and on.
Well, part of it is I don't think it's either cowardice or anything like that. What he's doing, I think, is it's very important that it's maintaining the facade. This is a lowly Ronin. He's crazy. How he's saying things that a samurai could never say about the way of the samurai,
Right.
about honor and so forth,
Just
which are just ridiculous. So it is beneath him to watch this happen. at his rank, his role is to not look at it.
Well, that's what I mean, and we get
Um,
that sense because the camera sticks with him for a minute.
right.
We don't just see him exit like a villain and then like, oh, here's the hero. Because like that's how all these scenes are usually shot. Is just like, you know, the villain then leaves. Oh, well, the hero will best all these people, then go find the villain, which also he doesn't do, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
But it just sits with him. It sits with him long enough that like I paused it and wrote in my notes. I was like, are we just gonna hear the climax? I've already seen one showdown with this, one duel with this guy. I want to see his skills against like these other 15 people.
Well, I mean, part of it is, I mean, it's not, it's not about, he's not going for that guy.
Right.
He's going for the family crest. He's going for maximum damage,
Mm-hmm.
which is not necessarily somebody who is actually ultimately subordinate within the clan at the highest level of a subordinate, right? I mean, he's not a member of the, he's not a member of the household of the, he's not a member of the immediate family of the Lord. He's their chief. He's the chief counselor who's in charge when they're not there. And so, yeah, I mean, he's going for the he's going for the things that hit the underlying honor of the clan even more so. I mean, obviously, to have your chief counselor killed would be really, really embarrassing. He also, he can't necessarily get to the guy, right?
Well,
I mean,
right.
Yeah, no, I mean the way everything to maintain the facade as the facade crumbles.
Well, I don't know how much he thought it was actually going to crumble though, too, because it was like 15 on 1. Like, I'll just take this guy out. All right, end of story.
Right. And I have to believe that because that is the way things are supposed to work.
Right.
This is a starving Ronin. These are our
He's
samurai.
outnumbered.
Sure.
Yeah.
Starving Ronin are supposed to be Ronin for a reason, and it doesn't quite go that way.
No.
No, it's all just really beautifully choreographed. So that's the other thing. I've said this before. I'm sorry, but like, who shoots the best action in this period? Probably Japan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of said that through the mid and late 60s when we were looking at the Yakuza noir stuff. It's clearly here. I mean, how about the action in Seven Samurai, almost 10 years earlier? It's
so developed.
Yeah. Well, also, we should say it's more than just, and I don't have all the names for credits off the top of my head, but it's more than just the shooting of it. You can shoot all of the great action you want. If you don't have an editor who knows what they're doing, doesn't matter how great it was you shot it. Like the pacing's all messed up. You're disoriented. You don't really know who's doing what or what's going on where. So it's the whole crew.
Yeah.
But I guess mainly those two parts, and then also whatever they're doing as far as working with the director goes.
Yeah. No, I mean, so like, yeah, we're looking at, I mean, an absolutely superlative film, up and down, perfect blending of theme, action, film, acting, pathos, the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful action. And what turns, I think, to be a structural critique, which succeeds at being kind of universal at the same time that it's very particular to a time and place.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't think I have much else. Watch this movie. It rocks. It's a masterpiece that rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, just even going through it, I was like, well, fuck all that little stuff. Like stuff I didn't even realize I saw and appreciated came out just having this conversation, to the point where I was like, well, I was already looking forward to watching this again. It really is one of those that like it's not that it's like a twist ending or anything, but it's one of those, once you know the full story and then you revisit it, you're going to really, I think it's definitely one of those, like on that second watch, knowing the whole story, you're like, oh shit, there's even more here than what I thought I experienced the first time, because I didn't even know what to look for at the start.
Yeah. So like, how did it sort of, I mean, so it unfolded for you, right?
Yeah.
Like it's there's just a mild, it's not Rashomon like, but you get, it's more like bouncing stories, right? As you get the counselor telling the initial story of the bamboo suicide, and then you get the new layers of that.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any shock to know that it's like from the writer of Rashomon, or like in Akira, or even Seven Samurai, the way that each individual samurai has their I mean, I haven't seen that one in a long time, so I may be misremembering this, but how each individual samurai has their own chunk in the story where you see what led them to the story they're currently in the middle of, right? Like, I think
Right.
Hashimoto as a writer maybe just is really intrigued by what information to reveal to the audience at what point in time for maximum impact in your narrative. And whether that's a flashback or flash forwards or a reinterpretation of events that you thought you've already seen and have an idea about is a insanely compelling way to structure a story.
Right.
Yeah.
And on that note, what are we doing next?
So up next, we are going to, I guess I would say finally, we are checking off a lot of, we've always been meaning to get to kind of
Yeah,
either films or filmmakers.
We've been meaning to get to Kobayashi probably for the entire life of this podcast.
Yeah, it's one of the early films I think we wrote down. So we lost one of like cinema's greats back in September, Jean-Luc Godard, who by accounts did assisted suicide at 91 in Switzerland, where it's one of the few places that's legal, due to multiple disabling pathologies that were slowly taking his life. So he went out on his own terms. We have never actually looked at a Jean-Luc Godard film, and this is a political cinema podcast, so it's about time. And one of his that I've always meant to watch, granted, okay, there's tons of Godard movies that we could just be like, okay, yeah, we're jumping in, we're going to do, Contempt or Made in the USA or La Chinoise or Weekend. Like we may get to some of those eventually, but I wanted to watch a film of his kind of in memory of his passing that I haven't seen before. And I wanted to go into one of his genre films. And he did a movie called Alphaville in 1965 that is listed as a science fiction neo-noir. We just did a bunch of, Yakuza noir. I thought, well, this is kind of an interesting take. And knowing that he's an overtly political filmmaker, I thought, let's see how much he's playing with genre in order to really also look at some of his favorite political themes. So we're going to take a look at Alphaville from 1965.
Well, I'm excited for this. Godard kind of drives me a little crazy, but I recognize why he's great. So I am looking forward to digging in on this. I mean, a science fiction noir, a political science fiction noir does sound kind of exactly what I want in life. So I'm gonna give it a shot.
So this is not one that you've seen before, then, based on what you were just saying.
It is not. I mean, I have a lot of problems as a cinema person. I have a lot of holes in like this sort of particular area. And one of them with Godard is because when I watch a Godard movie, I kind of like, this is very smart. I'm very impressed with your form. I want to slap you. You feel so fucking smug. Like
I can't disagree with you there. I like how in your face he is a lot of times, but also like there's, I mean, if you just go into, okay, a very stereotypical one, but in 1960, like one of his breakout movies, Breathless, or even like My Life to Live, I just think they're just great films that are wildly inventive, light on their toes, very fun to watch. But I know what you mean. There's a chunk of his filmography that, as I said on the top of the show, just sort of feels like one of those cinema homework assignments.
it's, he's great. He's great. I'm not even saying they aren't entertaining. I'm just saying he's a smug art guy.
Yeah.
It's why when we went through the French New Wave, our little French New Wave episode on during the summer of the 60s, I wanted to do that's why I want to do Agnes Varda, because I was like, I don't want to do one of those guys. I want to do Agnes Varda. And at the time, I didn't even realize how much of a problem they'd had. So after watching that scene where she goes to his house with his like favorite pastry and he won't let her in, I'm like, yeah, fuck him.
I was gonna say you could argue there's like some smugness to hers too, but not nearly to the level of Godard.
Yeah. Oh, it's there. It's still pretty, arty. And by that, I don't mean art film. I mean like, did you know that we're doing art? Oh, we are.
Yeah.
But like we did Cleo, and Cleo doesn't feel like that to me at all.
Right.
But we're gonna, now that I've gotten my complaining out of the way, I'm looking forward to doing some Godard. I'll get over it. I'm excited for this, actually.
I am too. And one of the things that drew me to this one is, oh God, you know what? It's another one that I bought and I own, but I've never actually, I don't even know if I've opened the Blu-ray case or DVD. Like it may still be in the saran wrap. The fact that he's doing a dystopian science fiction film noir, but there's no like futuristic sets or anything. He just like went and filmed it like out at night in some, I think it was just in Paris actually. They're like, it's not trying to be the genre that it's supposed to be. Has always been intriguing to me. So for those of you that are watching along with us, if you don't own it, I believe it's free on Canopy at the moment, and it's probably on Criterion if you have Criterion as well. So that is what we are looking at for next time. But before we sign off, be sure to rate and review the show in whatever app you are currently listening to this in. And if you're enjoying the show, tell a friend or two about it. We're also up and running on the usual social medias. Follow the links in the show notes. And until next time, I am Aaron.
And I'm Isaac, and stay safe out there, especially if your clan happens to be disbarred unjustly for trying to rebuild a wall, and then you end up being a homeless Ronin and get into a jam. Don't try out the Aya clan. They're just assholes.